Hello, everyone, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where we break down the commodity space for both new and experienced investors. Before we get started, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investing advice. Do your own due diligence. And I thought we would do a recap of 2022 and a look ahead to 2023 when it comes to the uranium space. And there's no one better to have on the show for that than Mr. Terry Papineau. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. I appreciate it. And there are a lot of other good people that you could have invited for uranium, but thanks for having me. And I'd like to just shout out to my uranium friends and the diehard uranium investors out there that are sticking with it.
Absolutely. Shout out to you. You know who you are. Now, before we take a look ahead to 2023 and maybe get your forecast there, let's take a look back on how 2022 was for the uranium sector. In your mind, what are some of the top stories and most significant tailwinds for uranium in 2022?
Well, that's a great question. I've thought about it and put my ideas on paper here because it's been quite an eventful year. But before we start talking about 2022, I thought that it was important to set up with the end of 2021. Because in the summer of 2021, Sprott came out with this Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. Well, they started operating it. And right out of the gate, they started gobbling up pounds on the spot market, which drove the price of uranium up. And also, the equities followed with a truly impressive run during the fall of 2021 that made all of the uranium investors very happy and giddy. And that culminated with a sell-off in December of 2021 that kind of rolled into 2021 as well. But after that event, everybody was expecting that, this was just finally what we've been waiting for so long, and this was going to continue because spot market was drying up. Sput just had steam behind them. They were thinking about listing on the New York Stock Exchange. And this was just going to really, continue into 2022. And Sprott was taking over a uranium equities fund. They were going to start operating that in February, March, April of this year, which they did, which is the URNM fund. And so, everybody thought that, finally, uranium's time has come and our patience will be rewarded. After that, the next event was really the Cameco, the 2021 Q4 conference call that occurred the first week of February of 2022, around that, or I think it was the first week of February. And, the famous Tim Gitzel phrase there where he came out and said, "It's time," just like a boxing match or a UFC match where, just getting everybody really excited. And what he was referring to was the restart of McArthur River. And the reason why he was announcing the restart of McArthur River was because of, again, what we've all been waiting for, activity in the long-term contracting market, where they were talking about how many pounds they contracted in 2021. And then just for the first 4 weeks of 2022, they had, the contracting activity was really robust. So again, all good news. Everything is really starting to roll. Everything is coming together like everybody has been expecting. But then we have the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which kind of flipped everything, upside down. And what really occurred is that with this aggression, all of the Western utilities, it's realized that they were depending on Russia for a large portion of their conversion and a large portion of their enrichment services. And, now they realize that they don't necessarily want to continue doing business with Russia on a go-forward basis. So now they need to find those services elsewhere. And so that, and there's not a large capacity outside of Russia that's available. Like right now, there's capacity that's being built up that's going to be available in the future. But at that point in time, they had to turn very quickly at what capacity is there, and then they started, contracting that capacity, which drove the price of conversion and drove the price of enrichment up very quickly in those, in that February, March, April period. And just to give you an example, for the year so far, the conversion prices, so the spot prices of conversion services has gone up 150% for the year so far. And the long-term price for conversion services has gone up 47.2% so far for the year. And enrichment, the spot price for that service has gone up 251% for the year. And the long-term price for that service, for enrichment service, has gone up 104.5% for the year. So the utilities like really shifted their focus where they were concentrated on contracting for the beginning of the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, which is what we've all been waiting for. Now they put a halt to that and they started focusing on conversion and enrichment. So that kind of put a pause on long-term contracting, and it created a bit of uncertainty there in the market in that period of time. And the equities kind of rolled off a little bit too as well during that period. So that created uncertainty, and I think that uncertainty took some time to sort out. When the market started digesting that the price of these services were going up in March and April, then the equities resumed. The end of March, beginning of April, the equities resumed, and they peaked in April. We had a nice peak there in April, which is encouraging again. But then what happened? The general market and the general feeling of not knowing what's going to happen, inflation going up, central banks wanting to finally tackling that inflation, realizing that it's true, it's not just made up, and that it's here to stay, and it's a serious issue. So the central banks throughout the world started focusing on that and started raising interest rates, which flipped the market from risk on to risk off. And hundreds of billions of dollars were taken out of the general markets and are still out. So since that peak in April, we've seen a sharp decline, a sharp sell-off, and just a general unease, uncertainty in the markets, which still exists today, which is basically what's driving the fact that there's hardly no money coming back to the general markets since April. And our equities, our uranium equities, have really suffered along with what's happened in the general markets. And really, we're off 50 to 60% from the highs, which is a pretty steep decline, and it's a good punch in the gut, and it's very difficult to take. So I think that with that general market hangover, what we've seen is kind of capitulation with the retail investor. Retail investors have become impatient, and you see it on social media. Oh, you've been saying this, you've been saying this, you've been saying this, and blah blah blah, and it's not happening. Well, what happened is a lot of people rush in when things are going up, and then the people that are buying as they're going up and they're at the peak, well, they get really hit harder. Someone like me who's been a long-term uranium investor, like a lot of these equities I bought at prices that are much lower than where they are now. I'm still up on most of my equities. But my portfolio value has gone down by 50, 60%, but I'm still up from where I started because I've been in this since I've been buying uranium equities since 2017, where prices were much lower than now. So I think that, in a nutshell, kind of sums up what we've seen this year. And I'd also like, and this is going to spill into the next question, I believe, is that is the inactivity of SPUT, the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, whereas they were so active in the last half of 2021. In 2022, although they've managed to buy pounds during the year, they've had their hands tied and were unable to buy and raise money for much of 2022.
Right. So I definitely want to touch on that negative sentiment that you're seeing out there. What would you say? Like, what do you say to those retail investors out there who feel like they're caught holding the bag? Maybe those people who were buying as the prices of the equities were going up and now feel like, they've been cheated. Obviously, focusing on the thesis and the long-term game is the way I approach things as well. But what would you say to someone like that?
Well, I think that there, a lot of people kind of, I don't like people that play the victim where they've been cheated and you've been saying this, you're like, listen, nobody's, forcing you to hit the bid button there. Like do your own due diligence. And, when you're buying, it's like people in crypto, that you just bought and bought and bought and, made that bubble, inflated that bubble. Well, the people that are buying at the top, well, like you have to think about what's happening here. When you're buying at the top, the risk is much greater that that bubble is going to burst. So the victims on social media, like I don't really have anything to tell them. But what I can say is that people always ask me. I've always been very transparent with this. I'm 100% uranium, 100%, and I'm still 100% uranium. And with the group that I have, we bounce ideas off each other, and I continue to look for information. If the uranium story and the nuclear story, received a hit, and if the fundamentals were changing, well, yeah, I'd have to reevaluate, and you'd have to say, yeah, maybe it is time to sell. But it's completely the contrary. I mean, as we're going along, and I've said this in almost every interview I've done, like the fundamentals as we're going forward are just getting better and better and better. And that spring, I've used that analogy often, it's just getting coiled and coiled and coiled. And at some point in time, I don't know when, but at some point in time, the contracting cycle is going to come back. This utilities need uranium now. And that's going to happen. And when that happens, it's going to drive the price of uranium up. And we could talk about that later on in the interview. But that's what I say to people. The fundamentals have not changed. And if you came into the trade to ride the wave and you're a trader, well, you got burnt. But if you came into the trade as a long-term investor, doing your homework, doing your due diligence, making sure that you're buying good quality companies. And even though the good quality companies have been hit as hard as not so good quality companies, but I mean, if you're in there and if you're in this and you understand the fundamentals, well, then it's easier to take. But it's never fun to see your your portfolio or your investment go down 50, 60%. It's never fun to ride that. And I understand how they're feeling.
Yeah, and I think that definitely speaks to the fact of understand exactly what you're investing in. Make sure you do all the necessary due diligence on the companies you're invested in so that if a stock goes up or down, you can try to pinpoint the reason why, and you can understand that it could be because of a broader market sell-off. And then you could more easily identify, well, maybe it is a problem with this company, but if you don't have a thesis to begin with, then you have nothing to go to if the price falls. So a lot of people end up panicking and selling. So I think that's very important to do the right due diligence. So let's move into some forecasts for.
Can I add
Oh, yeah,
just
go
one
ahead.
thing, Jesse?
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But the other thing is, listen, if you're the type of investor, that got in this, for the trade because it's going up and you want to ride that wave, well, that's called volatility. And if you want volatility on the way up, well, you have to understand that as much volatility as there is on the way up, there's as much volatility, if not more, on the way down. So you have to understand that as well. So, these are hard lessons that are being learned here.
Absolutely. I'd like to get your forecast for the uranium spot price. And obviously, these things are impossible to predict. Price predictions are very difficult to be accurate with. But imagine we're doing this interview in December of 2023. Give me a range where you think the spot price will be around that time and the catalyst that you think will drive it to that point.
All right, so you're going to put me on the spot here, which is very difficult. But um, what I can say is, at some point in time, the price is going to resume its ascension. And I think that it's going to at least reach levels that we saw in 2007. I think that all of the fundamentals are stacked now. It's a much better setup than what was occurring before the 2007 peak. So, and in 2000, we saw a spot price peaking at around 139, $140 US a pound in July of 2007. So I think that we're going to reach at least that price at some time in the future, at some point in the future. Um, I think that this year, if we've got signs now that central banks might be turning dovish instead of hawkish, that they might. I don't know what's going to happen, but if once the market turns and risk is back on, if it's this year, I think we could see $75 price spot, maybe higher this year. I hope it'll be higher, obviously, but I think we'll see 75 to 80 this year at some point. And what I wanted to say with regards to uh, the spot prices, the catalyst is going to be the financial players, in my opinion. And the most important financial player is SPUT, the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. And they've been they've been in 2022. Most of the days they've been at a discount to NAV. And when they're at a discount to NAV, they are not able to issue the at the market, issue new shares at the market, and raise new money, take in new money, which will allow them to have enough money to buy pounds on the spot market. Now, even though the majority of 2022, they've been at a discount to NAV and not being able to raise money and buy pounds, they have purchased pounds in the spot market. So they've continued to add pounds. But the reason why I want to talk about this is, although some people might see this as a negative, there's another way of looking at this. And the way of looking at it is, in every other year, other than the summer 2021 to now, with almost no activity on the spot market, the spot price would have dropped like a rock to the bottom of a lake. That's what we've been experiencing from 2016 to the middle of 2021. When there's almost no activity, the spot price just drops. But this year, with almost no activity, with a very thinly traded spot market, the spot price has remained relatively stable between the 45 to $50 range. It's stayed almost right there the entire year. So that's actually good news. It means that most of the inventory on spot, in my opinion, has been mopped up. And you have people that know much better than I do that have commented on that in videos, that are in the industry, that have said that that's in fact the case, that it's difficult now to find large quantities of pounds. You could buy 100,000 here, 200,000 there, those kinds of transactions. But someone that's looking for more pounds, they're going to drive the price up significantly. So that means that this year was kind of a tester. It's been a kind of a slow year on the spot market, but the spot price maintained. So I think that once risk is back on, money flows, flows back into SPUT. SPUT has money now, starts buying pounds again. We're going to see that spot price start going up again fairly quickly. And that should be really a positive for the sector, and that'll be a positive for the equities. I think that's what the equities are looking for, a resumption in the rise of spot price. And I think that's what's going to happen this year. It's only a matter of time.
Right. And by this year, you mean 2023, of course. So technically
Yeah,
next
sorry.
year.
Yes.
All good.
2023.
So we've seen a lot of, I think one of the big tailwinds behind uranium is the shift in political sentiment and even a lot of environmental groups getting behind it as a green form of energy, as it is super clean and very, very safe, despite a lot of the misconceptions out there. But we still have some outliers like Germany and Austria who are staunchly against nuclear. We have Germany trying to keep their three remaining reactors online, but they still want to eventually reverse course and shut them down. They're burning record amounts of dirty coal. It's complete hypocritical mess. So, do you think 2023 is the year when the politicians in charge finally wake up and embrace nuclear in countries like that? Or do you think it's going to take more pain, perhaps a significant amount of pain, and a shift in the political leadership to really reverse course and embrace nuclear energy?
Well, that's another great question, and I'd like to talk about basically two groups of politicians, or two. So you mentioned specifically two countries. You might be able to add Australia and a couple other countries in that mix where they're just in la la land with regards to nuclear. So with regards to your question, no, I don't think 2023 is going to be the year that Germany and Austria and Australia like finally see the light. I think that especially for Germany and Austria, they're way too far down that rabbit hole of wind and solar being the solution. And they just, that's where they planted their flag, and they don't want to come off that hill. I think they're way too far down the rabbit hole, unfortunately. However, I think that the with regards to most other countries, like, we've never had it better. Like, nuclear has never had its day in the light like it has now. The announcements are almost daily now of different countries, and there's all kinds of information on that, and on Twitter, and with regards to announcements that are being made. Like, just for example, in my home province of Ontario, they're starting the construction of a small modular reactor. Like, that's right now. We've been talking about that we talked about it for maybe 2 years, but now it's a reality. So, we've got different companies now like NewScale, TerraPower, Rolls-Royce that are getting into, the construction of the design and the construction of small modular reactors. We've got, Bill Gates wanting to build one in Wyoming. And so announcement after announcement after announcement, England getting back in, France getting back in. So I think that Japan looking at, not only restarting their idled nuclear reactors, but also starting to build out new ones. So, I mean, your first question, what are the tailwinds? Those are the tailwinds. Like, the nuclear is back. And, barring a catastrophic event, I think it's going to continue because, some countries have tried that wind and solar experiment. And although it may have sounded like a good idea 10 years ago, we're realizing now, and proof is in the pudding with Germany, especially, that you can't rely on wind and solar for your base load power. It's nonsensical. And the facts are there, the proof is in the pudding. So I think that's why countries are revisiting what are the options. And when you look at hydro, well, a lot of the areas where you can install a dam have been used up. And so you might be able to build a bit of capacity there, in some places, but that's also an environmental issue. To flood a whole area is an environmental issue. So I think that people are now like realizing that it's the safest, the cleanest way to produce baseload 24/7 power with little environmental impact. Uh, when you talk about the waste, that's, people have the image of The Simpsons, where the waste is in a liquid form, and it's oozing out in a green, like a radioactive hue in there, like color. But I'm not aware of, and if anyone is, of any incident where there's been, a leak of spent fuel, and there's been, like consequences because of that. So, people are realizing it's safe and that the waste is, we can handle the waste in a safe, effective manner. It's coming back. And, we're getting headlines almost daily now that are showing that money's going to pour in. And so that's just going to be another boost for uranium, for the uranium sector. I mean, the more small modular reactors we build, the more we need feed, the more we need uranium. It's not just the small modular reactors that are making the headlines. It's the extensions of current fleet. So, and in one of the greenest states possible, which is California, they just announced that they're extending the life of Diablo Canyon, which they were supposed to shut down. But now they're really, hey, no, we need this thing. This is a good thing, and so they're going to extend the life of that one. So I think that's the best example I can give of how people are now realizing, and politicians are now realizing that, listen, we can say that nuclear is okay. Not only can we say nuclear is okay, we're not going to get hurt in the elections or in the polls by saying that. Like, even the population in general is realizing that nuclear is a necessity in the mix of providing safe power, safe and environmentally friendly power.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the new nuclear renaissance is upon us. Embrace it or get left behind. And while it's very unfortunate that countries like Germany, Austria, Australia, as you mentioned, Belgium is another one that is anti-nuclear. Um, the good thing is those people are starting to look crazy now. You know, it used to be us that looked like the
Yes.
crazy ones, and now it's the people who are denying nuclear who appear to be the crazy ones. So I think that's very
Yeah.
positive for uranium moving forward. So let's now get into your stock picks. Which companies are you most bullish on in upcoming here in 2023? And let's start off with the explorers. What are you looking at in the exploration space right now?
Well, I've also been quite transparent with regards of how I've constructed my portfolio. And my portfolio consists probably, I'd say, 60% uh, in explorers. And the reason why I've done that is because I think that if you can get into like a quality explorer pre-discovery where the market caps are fairly low, if there is a discovery, then the rewards there can be significant. And although it's impossible to determine which explorer will make a discovery because it's a very rare thing to do, so I spread out into a basket of what I consider to be quality explorers. And luckily, and I've also been transparent that because of my trading platform, which allows me to buy mostly only on TSX and New York Stock Exchange, those explorers have been focused in the Athabasca Basin, which is like the Saudi Arabia for uranium. If because of the quality of the deposits there. Now, not everything is perfect in the basin. Some of the deposits are a real challenge to, even though they're a nice deposit, it's a very challenging area to mine in because it's a basin. A basin means like a bathtub. And so there's a lot of water in that basin, which makes it very, very challenging to mine. However, that water is also responsible for these huge deposits because that's how they travel. And I'm not a geologist, and I don't want to I don't want to embarrass myself here, but there are deposits there that are just world class, like the next gen Arrow deposit is an example like that. That is, anyways, do your due diligence, like look it up, but it's an amazing deposit. Fission has a great deposit. ISO has a great deposit. Anyways, Denison has amazing deposits. So in terms of explorers, I'm focused in the Athabasca Basin, and I have three that I'm really focused on right now. And I make it a point to talk to the geologists on a regular basis, to talk to the CEOs of these companies on a regular basis. And what I've learned about the Athabasca Basin is the best place to find uranium is where you find uranium. So when an exploration company goes out and drills, if they if they in that drill, if in that core, if they find uranium in the core, even though it's a small amount of uranium, that's a sign that the uranium was flowing through there, passed through there, and so in that area, in that property, there might be an area where that uranium that was traveling through there was able to deposit to deposit and form a big deposit that's worth something. So because of that, uh, I'm focused now on three explorers, and I'm not focused. I still have all my explorers, but I mean, to answer your question, there's three that come to mind. The first is Fission 3.0. I mean, they were sleeping. They've been sleeping for since I've owned them, and talking. I've met the CEO. I've talked to him a few times, Deborah Ndawa. I called him last year. I'm like, okay, what are you guys doing? Like, are we going to see some action here? Because this uranium market's heating up. Like, are you guys going to start exploring? And so they raised some money last November, December, and they put that money to good use this year. They started exploring again, and they started drilling, and they hit a pretty nice discovery hole on their Patterson Lake property. And they came out with a news release on November 21st. And so they've got 2 drill rigs there right now. So they're stepping out from that discovery hole, and they came out with a news release last week saying that their first follow-up hole, they hit pretty significant. They can't say uranium because they haven't. They need to send the samples to the lab, and then but the scintillometer, which is the instrument that they use to measure counts per second, is off the scales. So there's something there. Will it be a big deposit? Who knows? But to me, the best place to find uranium is where you hit uranium. So if you look at their market cap right now, they're sitting at around 90 million. If let's say I'm just making forward-looking statements here, but extrapolating that if they find a deposit that's the size of ISO's deposit, for example, and their deposit they came out with it's 50 million pounds. And so their market cap is at 350 million. So at a price of $50 a pound uranium, well, we're below $50, but if the price of uranium goes up, then the value of that deposit goes up as well. So, so Fission 3.0, since the November 21st news release, they've gone up 300%. And they're still going up. Like yesterday, everything was red in the uranium sector except Fission 3.0. So people want to get their hands on that stock. And if they continue to, they'll be drilling till just about Christmas. They probably have about another week, maybe more than a week, two weeks maybe before Christmas of drilling left. If they come out with other good results, you can expect that stock to move, in my opinion. Another company that's hit uranium as well is Canalaska. And what I want to say about these 3 companies, they all have multiple projects, okay, multiple properties. So, but right now they're exploring maybe on 1 or 2 of them. So so it's working out for them now. Like, if not, they also have other options that they can move to or sell some of these projects to other companies. So, but Canalaska is in the same situation, although their stock has not performed like Fission 3.0 stock. They've also hit uranium. And when you listen to Corey Bielik, the CEO of the company, talk in all the interviews he's doing, I can't tell you how often he says, stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. Like, they're going back in January to drill. These guys know, they're onto something. They might have the tiger by the tail here. And they're looking for huge deposits worth hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. If you look at NextGen with their $300 million, their 300 million pound deposit, they're worth almost 3 billion. So those are the kinds of pre-discover, that's companies that I invest in. The last one is baseload energy. The James Sykes, the CEO there, they've got a discovery at Akio. This deposit is not a typical kind of It is and it isn't, but it's a shallower deposit. The grades are lower than what we're seeing in an ISO or a Denison Mines deposit or a Cameco's deposit at McArthur River and Cigar Lake, where it's like 20% uranium. Um, so their deposits are lower grade, or the Accio deposit is lower grade, but it's shallower. And even though it's lower grade, it's still quite a bit higher grade than the world average for a deposit. But it's a lower grade for the Athabasca Basin. However, it's shallow. Now, the question that needs to be answered here is how much uranium is there in that area to justify building a road, beginning the mining operations, because it can be mined. Deposits like this have been mined in the past. It just depends on the size of it. And so they'll be going back to that area to drill in the late spring, summer to kind of define the size of that resource. But in the meantime, they also have another property called Catharsis, and they're going there in January James Sykes is pretty excited about going to drill that. They have nice targets there that they want to explore. So those are the three companies that I would, talk about in terms of explorers.
And are there any developers as well that you've got your eye on leading here into 2023?
Yeah, there's a lot of developers out there. I mean, and we'll talk about that because in terms of which ones might go into production. But for the ones that I feel represent maybe the most value right now going forward for 2023, there's a couple of them that have received a little less love, I'd say, than some of the others, and not because they're lesser quality, but just for different reasons. It's and one of them is Consolidated Uranium. I think that one is really under the radar. And a lot of people don't even realize that they're kind of in the developer category, because they purchased a project from Energy Fuels, and they're the only company that has a toll milling agreement with Energy Fuels for the White Mesa Mill for that project. And it's a past producing mine that they've purchased, and they're drilling there. They're trying to see exactly how much uranium is on that property, trying to see the actual size of that resource. But their goal is not to produce many pounds, and their goal is to get into the market in a sweet spot when things resume rising again and the spot price begin, and they just want to produce maybe a million pounds here, a million pounds there, to sell into the spot market at those higher, to take advantage of those peak prices. So and because it hasn't really been loved. I think that it represents pretty good value, and they just announced buying the Virginia property, which is the largest undeveloped uranium deposit in the United States. So I think there's going to be value for that property, for that deposit. There's a ban on uranium mining in Virginia right now, but with the new governor, the new governor is kind of more like they're open to nuclear. They have a nuclear reactor there. And I think that the sentiment is kind of changing towards nuclear in Virginia. So that could be good for Consolidated Uranium. And the second one is GoviEx. I think that GoviEx is just under the radar. Daniel Major's doing his job, just like Phil Williams for Consolidated. They're doing a great job. He's moving the project forward. He's de-risking the project. He's at some point in time, people are going to realize that there's something here that GoviEx, and he's just moving forward to be able to move into production. And of course, not as much love for GoviEx in the market. So I think these two represent pretty good value for 2023.
Great. And now, speaking of producers, obviously the only two publicly traded companies producing any sizable amount of uranium is Cameco and Kazatomprom. But I would like to get your take on which companies you think are the most likely to go into production next. I don't see anybody going into production in 2023. We have Global Atomic, who has just started constructing their mine in Niger, very close to GovEx. So, which companies are you looking to be producing uranium? Not probably not here in 2023, but in the next few years.
Yeah, we've got a multitude of companies here. We have UEC, we have Energy Fuels, we have Global Atomic, which you've mentioned. We have Encore Energy, we have UR Energy, we have Paladin. We've got Consolidated Uranium is in there because they've got a mine and they've got the toll milling agreement with Energy Fuels, so it's not that difficult for them to start producing. Denison Mines is doing a great job with their ISR in the Athabasca Basin. Lotus Resources. So out of all those companies, the question is which one is likely to start producing the first? Paladin, of course. I think that it's probably Energy Fuels. They've got the mill, they've got the mine, they've got they're using their mill right now to produce a rare earth carbonate, and they talked about issuing an update on when they want to open their uranium circuit. So I think that out of all of them, I think Energy Fuels is the best poised to be the next producer.
Totally agree with you. That's my single biggest uranium holding. And, they also have a history of past production that is very large. Only Cameco was producing more than them in the US in the past. So they've already proven they can produce. They own all their properties. They have the mill, which I believe is the only licensed uranium mill currently in the United States. So they just have so much going for them there. So I want to talk about potential institutional investment into the uranium space. You covered that earlier. You were talking a little bit about big financial players potentially entering the space. There's an interesting article on CNBC recently that stated from 2015 to 2021, the pace at which venture capitalists put money into private nuclear companies eclipsed the entire VC space and even the fast growing climate tech space. Now, obviously, this is different from investing in uranium miners, but what it does show is there's a lot of money with interest in the sector in general. So, do you think 2023 could be the year that we start to see big institutional investment, hedge funds, pension funds, potentially jumping in to uranium stocks?
Well, I think that's going to depend on what we've already discussed, which is, will it be a risk on or risk off? Is 2023 the year that we're going to see risk back on? And when, money flowing out of bonds and into the general markets again, instead of the opposite. And if that occurs, if the central banks, if they manage to kind of rein in inflation without, you know, um, without sending the financial markets into a recession, which is kind of the general sentiment of what is going to occur right now. But if they can rein in inflation without heading us into a recession, then yes, I think 2023, if risk comes back on, then I think because of the compelling story in uranium here and in the nuclear space, like I said, like how tight can that spring be coiled? And it's coiled tight. So, and I think that because of the pause and the delay and it's taking more time, I think the story is getting more out there. And I think that, again, if split can return to a premium to NAV, at least a 1% premium to NAV, where they can start raising money again with their ATM and start buying uranium. And that's what I'm watching. I'm looking at split quite closely. And when they get back to a premium to NAV, then I think maybe not right away, but if it could, a couple of weeks of that where they're buying uranium and then the spot price starts rising again, I think that's going to bring interest back. And I think at that point in time, institutional investors are going to come in and take advantage of what's going to happen in this sector. I hope it's going to be 2023.
Yes, if not 2023, I think it won't be too far off. So I think you're pretty accurate there. Thanks so much for joining us today. It was an awesome conversation. For those who want to hear more from you, where can they find you online?
Well, I'm active on Twitter. So people have reached out to me. They've direct messaged me on Twitter, and for the most part, I respond. I don't respond to junk stuff, but for the most part, I've responded for people who've reached out to me on Twitter.
Okay, great. I'll put a link in the description below. What's your handle there?
It's Terry Papineau too.
Okay, perfect. We'll put that in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us. Wishing you and your family happy holidays and an awesome new year. And we'll definitely have to have you back on in 2023 to do another recap here.
It was my pleasure, Jesse. Same to you, and thanks for having me.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.